Hi, and welcome to the Kindled podcast, where we dig into the art and science behind kindling the motivation, curiosity, and mental well-being of the young humans in our lives.
Together, we'll discover practical tools and strategies you can use to help kids unlock their full potential and become the strongest version of their future selves. I am really bad at math. That is something I tell myself a lot. Katie, what about you?
I also tell myself that I'm bad at math. It's a big limiting belief that I have, and I don't wish it upon my kids. And I'm having a hard time facilitating that for them coming from where I've been. And so I'm really excited about our conversation today because we're talking to the founder of Art of Problem Solving Beast Academy. This is a very common, very popular math curriculum. And the guy that runs it is not just your average curriculum creator.
He's brilliant.
Yeah, it's crazy.
He's so smart.
Let me tell you a little bit more about Richard Rusczyk. He's the founder of Art of Problem Solving. I started that in 2003. He wanted to create an interactive educational opportunity for avid math students. The Art of Problem Solving now reaches hundreds of thousands of high potential math students every year through its learning centers, online schools, books, websites, and online learning systems. Richard co-authored 7 math textbooks and was one of the co-creators of the Mandelbrot competition, which is something that I've never heard of before, so I'm going to have to Google that. And he's a past director of the USA Mathematical Talent Search. Richard was a participant in National Math Counts, a 3-time participant in the Math Olympiad Summer Program, and a USA Mathematical Olympiad winner in 1989. He graduated from Princeton University in 1993.
Hold on, before we get to the conversation, Mandelbrot competition, I listened to a podcast that Richard was on, and Mandelbrot was a mathematician, and this was back in the 90s, and he went to a payphone and found the guy's phone number to ask him if he can use his name for the competition, and he told him yes.
Wow,
I thought that was a
that's
cool
really awesome. All right, well, let's talk to Richard. So we want to get started here by hearing a little bit about your background. Can you tell us about your math education journey, what brought you into this work, why you're so passionate about math, and kind of what your big why is, what change are you trying to make in the math world?
All right. Well, when I was a student, I was always really interested in learning. My mom was a first grade teacher, so I started reading pretty early because she practiced on me. But she also saw that I was very interested in math. So when I was in middle school, there was a new math competition that came out. It was called Math Counts. And she read about it in the newspaper, and she went to the school and said, I think my son will really enjoy doing this. And it turns out she was right. A teacher there invested a lot of time in me and some other students and brought us to the first math competition, the first Math Counts competition in that area, which was the first math competition I ever went to. That was the first place where I was in a room full of other students who were a whole lot like me. They read the same books, they laughed at the same jokes, they enjoyed the same sorts of things. It was the first time when I started to really realize that this thing that I really enjoyed doing and was kind of good at might have value in a broader world, because there were also other adults at this math competition who weren't required by being my parent or being my teacher to be happy about what I could do with mathematics. So that gave me a signal, because before that, all I had ever gotten that signal for, or seen that signal, I never got this signal, was basketball. Basketball was very important in my middle school. You can't see me. I'm about 5'7". Basketball was not going to be in my but it's math competition. I started to find my people and didn't have any idea then that, fast forward 15 years, every professional space I would enter would be full of those sorts of people. You don't see that when you're in middle school. All you see is how important basketball is. It was more of the same. So I went to high school in northern Alabama. I went to a high school that I like to describe as aggressively average.
Aggressively average. I love that.
So our high school, maybe 2/3 of us graduated. Maybe 10-15% went straight to 4-year college.
Wow.
So there weren't a whole lot of other students like me. There were a few, but there weren't many. But there was a teacher there, Gwen Snoddy is her name. She would bring a handful of us to competitions all over Alabama and then eventually all over the Southeast, where I would again get to meet a lot of people some of whom are still my closest friends, people that I met through these events. But I didn't really understand the importance of what I was doing in all of these competitions until I went to college. So in college, I went to Princeton, and well, you've heard me describe my high school. I was really worried about competing against students who went to Thomas Jefferson, these high-powered magnet schools, or went to Exeter, these fancy, wealthy private schools. I was worried about competing with them because they probably had all of this specialized training that I didn't have. The only specialized training I had of any sort was I went to a couple summer camps for mathematics. But other than that, it was mostly just working on old math contest problems by myself. But what I saw in college was that I had it backwards. I had the specialized training that the other students didn't have. And it was from all of that time that I spent working on problems that I didn't know how to solve. And so it wasn't the work that I'd done in school that had prepared me for college. It was the work I'd done outside school, being challenged with problems that I had never seen before. And that's what I refer to as problem solving, is solving problems that you've never seen before. So it was that experience, and it happened right away. Right away in college, I saw that so many students were really struggling because in college, the way the tests work is it's 4 or 5 problems. You've got 3 hours. The problems don't look anything like the homework. Well, that's what the hardest math contests are like. There are 4 or 5 problems. You've got 3 or 4 hours, and the problems don't look like anything you've seen before. You have to find a way through them. But in most of middle school and high school, pretty much everywhere, tests look exactly like the homework, but with the numbers changed. So I'd had this experience of figuring out how to overcome fear and how to apply the basic ideas I knew to solve harder problems. And what I found in college is that this skill transferred. So while I had learned it in math, I could take that same skill and apply it in physics, chemistry, economics, philosophy, computer science, engineering. It was all basically the same game. Take basic ideas that you understand and combine them in novel ways to solve problems that you haven't seen before. And that's where I started to realize these skills that I developed in math contests, they're really valuable. Why do students have to wait until math contests to see that? And that's what inspired me to start to bring this to more students.
That's amazing. So tell us a little bit about what the art of problem solving is. And then, we'll just leave it at that. I've got a lot of follow-up questions, but what is the art of problem solving?
So, our mission is to discover, inspire, and train the great problem solvers of the next generation. So there are a lot of pieces in there. Discovery is not just for us to discover them, but for the students to discover themselves. And that for me happened at math competitions. Is when I went there and I was like, oh, this is the sort of stuff that most resonates with me. And I think a lot of students, they may not have that opportunity in mathematics because what they're introduced and what they're shown all through elementary, middle, and high school is mathematics is the thing where you're taught a trick, you master the trick, you repeat the trick on the test, and then you learn the next trick. And that's all math is. And if you can't get the trick perfectly right, then you're not good. And that's a terrible thing to teach a child. We'll come back to that later.
Yes. So many people just think they're bad at math. But yes, keep going.
Yeah. Oh, where were we?
What is the art of problem solving?
Yeah, art of problem solving. So that's discover. The inspire piece is to get students really excited about mathematics and to get them to see the beauty that we see, to get them really inspired to learn more and to work through the hard points and to have that aha moment and get addicted to that aha moment when they really understand something new. And then that last piece, train, of course, that's where we spend a lot of our time, is to give the students both the fundamentals, but then also the general problem solving skills so that we can empower them to make that same transfer step that I found in college. We work in a lot of different lanes now because students learn in a lot of different ways. So we have now, by the end of this year, we'll have 15 learning centers around the country. We have 2 online schools. We have a series of books all through elementary school, all through high school. High school, middle school, and high school are textbooks. You recognize them as textbooks. Elementary school, we have a curriculum called Beast Academy, where the books, they're workbooks, like things that people recognize as workbooks, but they're also comic books. And comic books, that's our main pedagogical vehicle aside from the problems in the practice. And we went with comic books for a few reasons. First and foremost, you have children, you know how well lecturing third graders works.
Well,
It does not work at all. You need to have a conversation. And that's what the comic books allow us to do. The comic books allow us to simulate a conversation. So we create classrooms of the little monsters, and the kids love the monsters. They send us pictures of themselves dressed up as our monsters for Halloween.
And the illustrations are beautiful. My son used Beast Academy, and it's like he loves reading graphic novels. So when I showed him that, it's like, wait, this is my math workbook that I'm using, because he does not do well with workbooks and traditional education. We would just sit in the parking lot for hours, and he refused to go into the classroom. So I had no other choice. But okay, I guess you're coming home. And the first thing that we did for math was I discovered Beast Academy, and I was like, yes, like this is totally in line with the way he loves to learn. And the illustrations, because you're like, oh, we have this comic book. No, you guys, it is a really awesome graphic novel. And I learned so much and learned math in a way that I had never discovered. So I just had to interject there.
Well, thank you for sharing that. We love to hear that. And I think what you're responding to a bit there is what we're doing in these comic books is we're creating a space, and the kids will emotionally put themselves in that space. And what we're doing inside that space isn't just doing math. We are kind of simulating the behaviors we'd like the students to adopt. This creative struggle, working together, being okay with being incorrect sometimes. Like, that's not bad. Learning, trying new things. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. We get to simulate a lot of these things inside that comic book format in a way you can't do that in a workbook. Then we also, of course, knew we were going to go digital someday. So that's another reason we went with the comic books, is we didn't want to go digital just with black and white worksheets. And we have done that. So we've created an online learning system, it's Beast Academy Online, where we have a lot of practice for the students. Of course, we have online versions of these books. We have lots of videos that I've done. I think it's nearly 900 videos now on the Beast Academy platform. And once again, like, we're delivering the material in a lot of different avenues because students learn in so many different lanes. We also have 2 different online schools, one of which is audio video. We started that during the pandemic because we took all of our learning centers and pushed them online. We couldn't use our older online school, the online school we started way back in 2003. Our older online school, which is mostly for middle and high school, we teach math in a chat room, basically. It's text and images only, which is a fantastic medium for students who are really dialed in. They're really motivated, and they don't want to be on screen, because there are some kids who definitely don't want to be on screen. They don't want to listen to other people. They don't want people to hear them, but they do want to communicate. And the other thing they can do in this room is that they can read much better than they can listen. My wife will tell you that I can read much better than I can listen to. So, it's something that was made maybe to fit my learning style. But the kids can also reread. And this is something that students can't do in a typical classroom, is they can't re-listen to what the teacher said. They can't scroll back. They can't have a side conversation and then go back and see what was actually going on in class while I was paying attention to something else. They can accomplish that in this other online school. But once again, different learning avenues for different students.
Yeah, something that you keep saying that I just keep hearing is that these kids are really dialed into the signals that adults are sending them about what's important and what success is, right? And sometimes we forget that that's like their primary motivator, right? It's to like be connected to the adults in their life, to be seen as good, to be accepted, and to be seen as valuable to their community. And so what I hear you being really receptive towards is like building learning environments and using lots of different mechanisms that cater to that and that assume that that's what the child's looking for. And I think that's something that really sets the art of problem solving apart from other like learning entities that I've seen. Like, you really get that. And that's something that I feel like we like at Prenda have in common, because that's like our primary motivator too. It's just like, how can we create learning environments that assume the child's looking for a relationship and doesn't forget, we're not just trying to teach them tricks and then what did you say? Like, if you learn the trick, you repeat the trick. And if you can't repeat it just right, then you're not good. And it's like, my son really, really struggles with math. And I feel like even in Prenda, he's like surrounded by the message that it doesn't matter if you get that one problem wrong. It's like the creative problem solving and the persisting, but it's like, it's still really hard to to get kids to believe that unless you're like signaling that in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, you need to model it. And that's one thing for parents is, you said this really well, that the kids are very tuned in to what their parents think and what their parents value. So if you're sending the signal that they're supposed to get every single question right, they're going to have a hard time with getting one wrong here or there. And like, if they're getting every single question right, that just means they're not learning efficiently enough. They're not being challenged. So we don't even want them to be in a world where they're getting every single question right.
Right. Or even what testing cultivates. Take the test once, you don't do well, and then you're just moving on in a traditional classroom. And you mentioned multiple times you have mastered finding all the different avenues and all the different ways that each unique child learns. And what I keep hearing in your story and what has translated into the art of problem solving is the science of intrinsic motivation. You said, I found my people. That is relatedness. I was good at it. That's competency. And so then you've taken your own personal and autonomy and working on it on your own. And so then you've taken that and translated it into a company to reach thousands of kids, which is so cool. And you did teach for a little while as well, right? How'd that go?
So I dropped out of grad school because I wanted to be a math teacher. Then I was a high school math teacher for one semester.
One semester.
It's a solid effort.
Yeah, I was 22. I'm 52 now. So you can imagine what I looked like when I was 22. It did not go.
Like the students?
I did not. So the first day I'm in there, I'm up there, up the board. I started in the middle of the year. I'm trying to teach, and the kids are like, "What's the new kid doing?" Pretending to be the teacher. I'm like, oh
no, that's hard.
Yeah, it was. But there were some students that I could really reach. So I had an honors class, and those students were a lot like me. They were still solidly attached to learning. All of my other classes were not that. There were always in one of those in those classes, one or two or sometimes three students who they had the interest, they had the potential, and maybe earlier teachers hadn't seen it and hadn't been able to draw it out. I could reach those kids. But the kids who had already tapped out on learning, I was not equipped at 22 to reel them back in.
Yeah.
But look what you're doing now, which is so cool. It's like full circle.
Yeah, part of it started then was I'd co-written a pair of math books. I started during my senior year of college and then finished during this year while I was teaching. And those math books were for students who were involved in middle school and high school math competitions. And these books were starting to get some traction in that semester that I was teaching. We were selling, 50 or 100 books a month, which was great. It was enough to pay rent and pay for food. So that was good. But I was also looking at that saying, I'm reaching a lot more students with those books than I am in this classroom. And I didn't feel like I was serving the students in the classroom, all of them particularly well, but I was serving the students that I was reaching with the books because that was the audience I understood. That was the audience that I could serve. So I left teaching after that. And I took a hiatus. I got distracted. I traded bonds for 4 years. And then I took some time off.
Got distracted.
Yeah. It was way easier than teaching, way easier than teaching, and a good bit more lucrative as well. But it wasn't.
Yeah. You don't have to discipline bonds, You don't have to worry about bonds talking back to you.
The discipline goes the other way, I assure you.
Yes.
But it wasn't, that wasn't a creative enough endeavor for me. So I left bond trading, and then eventually, actually the way I got started with the company was I started working with a couple of students. I'd moved to San Diego. I had one student locally in San Diego, and I had another one in Northern California that I would work with on, it was either Yahoo Messenger or AIM, which, y'all are too young to remember those.
I know what that is. We're not too young.
I know. I do too.
That's our day.
We're not that much younger than you.
But then so one day I got the two of them online at the same time, and I just put them online in a room together, and it was magical just seeing them go. And I thought, wow, if it's this good with 2 students, what's it like with 10? What's it like with 100? And that's where I got the idea to build an online school. This is 2002, 2003 is when I got started with this, where I could put up a sign and say, we're going to do challenging, interesting mathematics. If you're looking for a greater challenge in school, or if you're just bored in school, come here and we'll work with you. And it turned out there are a lot of kids like me. I didn't know it at the time, but it turns out there are a whole lot of kids out there who need something more. And it's not just the kids who are getting hundreds on all their tests. There are plenty of students out there for whom math is not working for them, but they have the aptitude. But what we're doing with them in elementary school isn't working. So I had just a couple days ago, we opened up one of our academies in Mountain View up in Northern California, and we host an event there. And I stand in a room and meet with families, take pictures, sign books, that sort of thing. And early on, a mother and her daughter came in and described to me in tears, both of them described to me I'm starting to tear up just relating this, but their experience, she was in third grade, she was sometimes even withheld from her classroom. She was struggling with math so much. She was, one of the weakest students in the class. And now I'm meeting her. She's entering seventh grade. She's the top student in her class. She's entering algebra. And the difference between those two things was Beast Academy. They started working through our Beast Academy curriculum and then went through our pre-algebra. And that, I want to say, it rescued her. The experience she was having with math, she was never going to have a good relationship with mathematics. And here she is, 3-4 years later, describing herself as I'm going to do something with math in my life. We have the reputation of we're for the, quote, smart kids. And I think the challenge here is I don't think the world is very good at identifying those kids.
Totally.
And
100%. Because a lot of those kids, if they don't have the motivation to do it, then they see so many gifted kids just don't have the interest. Therefore, they don't have the motivation. But if you can capture them in a way that is in line with the way they get excited about learning and truly can feel empowered. Because, my son, we had tried, not to throw Mathnasium under the bus or anything, but we had tried Mathnasium, and it was just all these worksheets. And it was how many worksheets do you want to do? And it was all these reward systems. It's the more worksheets you do, the more rewards you get. So my son, literally, they're oh my gosh, he's doing 11, worksheets within just the hour. Usually a kid finishes 1 or 2, but then he was excited to get all the rewards. That lasted 3 weeks. And he's I'm not excited about the rewards anymore. I already got everything I needed. And then he was literally would not get out of the car to go back. So those extrinsic motivation or motivators only lasted a very short amount of time, whereas something like Beast Academy, it's fun, it's engaging, it's, looking at math, and even your videos are, you're teaching math. I was excited about math, and I was one of those students that felt or one of those people that I would say I'm bad at math. I would memorize all the formulas. I would get A's on tests. I could not retain any of the information I learned or even tell you what I was doing, but I was just really good at memorizing formulas and being able to spit it out. So watching your videos, I'm oh, that's what we're doing. It makes so much more sense now. So I think that's a really big key. And so what would you say is the main challenge in traditional math education and the way teachers are taught how to teach it in a traditional classroom?
You might have just hit the nail on the head for the main challenge is the way teachers are taught. It has nothing to do with how to teach it in a classroom. Teachers, a lot of teachers are going to come in and teach math the way they were taught it. So this problem just keeps feeding itself until there's an intervention and we change teachers' relationships to mathematics. And I think that is one of the big challenges. So you look at elementary school, and that's where the problem really sets in. Again, my mom was a first grade teacher. Love first grade teachers. They love children. They love reading and writing. Math, maybe not so much. And I think that's one of the challenges we have is in elementary school. A lot of our elementary school teachers are there to teach reading and writing, and they're there because they love children, and they have to teach math. And to get
I never thought of it that way.
To get them to change their relationship with mathematics is a challenge because for a lot of them, math was the hard part of school, and they didn't have a great relationship or a great.
That right there. It's we're all coming up through the same trick-based approach to math. We don't really get it. We don't see the beauty and the wonder in math. We don't get it, the relationship to how math makes my desk stand up or how math was used in the real world. And then a quote that I like, I can't think of who said it right now. But you cannot lead a child to a place you have not been. And if you do not love, like I can very easily transfer my love of children's literature, for example, to my kids, because they're another great quote. This is Gordon Neufeld: "A child's heart finds something to attach to and becomes like it." So if I'm building all this relationship and creating this relationship of warmth and compassion and mentorship, and the kids are like, this is my person. What does my person think is important? It goes back to those signals, right? And the person giving the signal is like lukewarm on math, then they're going to be like, oh, they're going to take that. They're actually going to dial it up a notch. Like every time it transfers, it gets dialed up. So they're like, oh yeah, math is not useful. Math is boring. Like all of those stories, the narratives, the limiting beliefs around math get turned up, and then we have to overcome them. We overcome them with worksheets and bribes. We don't try to overcome them with art and beauty and like wonder of the world, right? Because we don't know how to do that, because I can't describe that, because I haven't internalized it myself. So there's no way that we can take the hundreds of thousands of teachers in the United States and have them transfer like love and wonder and like motivation for math, because they don't have it. So it absolutely has to start like at the fount, the head of the river, right? Before we all like go fill our water bottles up, like the water's muddied. We got to fix that.
Yeah, that's right. And I think part of the way you do it, Adrian's described it a little bit right here, and we hear this from a lot of parents who use our materials and some teachers. This is the way I wish I had been taught math. When the parents or the teachers are learning the math alongside the child, going through Beast Academy or relearning the math or learning a different perspective on the mathematics, that's where the relationship changes. So we have several schools now that are implementing Beast Academy as a full curriculum. And in one of these schools I was visiting recently, there's a teacher there who she described herself as pretty severely math phobic before starting to teach Beast Academy. And she's had such a good experience over the last 2 years teaching math with Beast Academy that when the math specialist position opened up in her school, she switched into that lane. So she could teach math all the time, which is something that she didn't imagine she'd ever do. This is 20 odd years experienced teacher. And every year is this like, I'm going to teach math because I have to, but I'd really rather do something else, to I want to teach math all the time because now I understand it and now I enjoy it. And that I think is the way you start to change these relationships, is get good materials in the hands of the teachers, and some of them will convert.
Totally. So
I want the next generation of teachers will be better if we can teach more of the kids better.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Totally.
Yeah.
So walk me through, like you get a student in one of your schools, or maybe someone, a Beast Academy participant, and they're just like not vibing with math. They maybe have some of those limiting beliefs. Like, how do you guys go about getting kids excited to learn math?
Yeah, there are a few different things, a few different strategies one can try. One is get them around other kids who are excited about math. That can help. But you have to figure out where their level is. And sometimes that's tough, because sometimes you've got a parent with a 7th grader, and they're like, my student should be learning algebra. And you're like, no, your student should maybe do ready. Beast Academy 4 and Beast Academy 5. They'll go through it pretty quick. A lot of it will be review, but they'll be rebuilding their foundations, and then they'll be able to go faster later. So finding the right level, being willing to maybe place down a level, maybe even 2 levels, that's
an amazing moment where you, as a parent right there, like this is a signaling moment. It's like, and is this a problem? And am I disappointed? Are we frustrated with this not being where we're supposed to be? Or is this a moment where that parent can sit in that spot and be like, awesome, I'm so excited that you're going to get what you need. And like, I love you. And I'm just as warm and excited with you as if you had like, we're on level, right? Like that is a big, powerful moment that we sit in as parents. And,
yes.
And it's hard as parents to hear that your kids are behind. We see this at Prenda all of the time, because we do adaptive diagnostic testing and placement and make sure that kids, we literally don't care how old you are. Like we only care what you need to know next. And we want to match you with that as soon as possible, so that your learning minutes, we call it their learning frontier. All of your learning minutes can be spent at your learning frontier, because that's when your learning is the most effective and efficient. And that's when you experience the most amount of competence. And that's where we retrain these limiting beliefs. And then we have time, because that learning is so much more efficient and effective. We can go outside and play, right? We don't need these big, long sit in your seat 8-hour school days. Cause it's like, if we can get where you're going, make some progress, like go play baseball. It's great. Go play basketball.
Go play basketball. I think labeling them with levels too and numbers versus grades, I think is so helpful as well, because we've done a lot of different math curriculums, and Right Start is one of them too. It's like letters instead of grades, because my son, he's twice exceptional and can be, have some rigid thinking, and we've been working on his cognitive flexibility. He'll say, well, I'm supposed to be in this grade. And he tests many grade levels ahead typically, but there are always holes, right? So I'm like, well, you're on level G. It's not even, or you're on 4A or 4B. So I think that helps to undo some of the shoulds and where we should be, and look at that individual, unique child and place them where they are to help that. Because if they're working at a level that they're not ready for, or if it's too like they're way more advanced, like what they're thinking, then how are you going to empower that child?
When we originally released Beast Academy, the cover was grade 1, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. And then we had some teachers come back to us and said, if you change that grade to level, I'll be able to use this with a lot more students.
Yeah. Powerful.
What are the other exciting ways that you get kids excited about learning?
The part is to show them surprising things. Like, once you start to get them to engage with any sorts of questions, like, there are a lot of things in math that are really, really surprising. And that, if you can get kids to see some of those and start to get curious about why some of those things are true, or just the fact that they know them and their parents don't, that's kind of fun as well. So that's another one. Answering the why question, being able to explain to them why things are the way why these things are the way they are. There are kids out there who will get very frustrated with not knowing why. They may not communicate that. They may not enunciate that, but they will be shutting down because they're just doing this routine, but they don't understand why it works. Okay, I stack the numbers up. I add the ones in this column, and then I take the extra number and I put it here. And that's not terribly motivating. But when you get them to really understand the why these tools work the way they do, that can really turn it on. Another, of course, is just being excited about it yourself. It's not, now we have to do math. It's now we get to do math.
Yeah.
And then just...
I was going to say, you bring so much energy in your videos, which I think is a really key component to get kids excited, because you're excited and you're like, look how this works. Like, it's so fun. Because then you see that same energy, even though it's a screen and you're not here in my my living room, it still comes through the screen, and it's really exciting.
So, follow-up question to this. What do you mean when you say teach math through problem solving? Like, how is it different? How, like, we kind of painted the picture of the trick base. Like, how is this different? What does the approach look like?
The approach looks different because we lead with problems. We ask the students questions. So in a lot of our classes, or all of our classes, but a lot of the time, the teacher doesn't start by telling the students stuff. The teacher starts by asking questions. And the students answer, the students work through problems. The teacher should be asking questions more than giving answers. At the end, the teacher comes back through and summarizes. And it's like, okay, this is what we learned, and these are the main lessons we're going to draw from it. But the goal there is to get the students to make a lot of the leaps. They won't make every single one, and they might need to be led pretty close to the water before they can drink. But the ones that they discover themselves, then it becomes their math instead of math that's been handed to them. It also gives them some practice in the actual experience of learning and discovering new things. And that, I think, is the critical thing we need to teach students, because that's the human thing that we still get to do when AI is doing everything else. Regurgitating old stuff, computers are way, way better at it than humans will ever be. So if we set students up with that, we're setting them up to compete with computers, which is guaranteed to set them up for failure. We need to train them for human things, but we need to get practice. Otherwise, they're going to be formula memorizers. I was as well. So that was the way I approached mathematics all the way until I got to the highest level of competitions. I could memorize my way through a lot of the levels of competitions, but there was a level at the Olympiad level where you had to write proofs for things. It took me 2 years to be able to solve any of the problems, even a single problem. Like, I got to the training camp the first 2 years for the US team, and I went the whole camp. 5 weeks, I saw 50 or 60 problems on practice tests, couldn't solve a single problem for 2 years that I did this. And that's when I had to go back and relearn most of my mathematics from a lens of not what is true, but why is it true? And it was that shift.
I'm curious, do you think it's important that kids are memorizing math facts and multiplication? Because you're talking about AI and tools and calculators and things like that. And so I'm just curious.
They need to know some,
what your thoughts are on that.
They need to know some math facts. They need to know some. Like in my perfect world, a student doesn't get a calculator until they can prove the quadratic formula. It is not my perfect world anymore. And that's not because we want this. Math is a great tool to learn how to solve new problems. That's its power. It's not when I'm teaching math, I'm not teaching math. When I'm teaching math, I'm teaching everything. And that's the goal. The goal is not for them to learn the mathematics. The goal is for them to learn how to learn. And when you give them a calculator, you're taking away that opportunity. You're taking away that opportunity. They'll have their calculator to punch the numbers in and they'll get the answer. What they're learning is the algorithm of the things to punch to get the answer. And by the time they're actually doing problem solving, the problems are really, really hard. We could start with easier problems and take away the calculator. And they're going to have to reason their way through. Now, you talked about memorizing math facts. Just about the only thing that's worth memorizing is a multiplication table, and that's not that many math facts. We don't want them memorizing 5 + 7 is 12. Like they should develop a number sense to do that. But 5 times 7, at some point, we don't want them going, okay, 5, 7, 7, and 7 is 14, so 21. Like, yes, get them through the multiplication table. They can move on to other things if they haven't mastered the multiplication table, but there's not that many that they actually have to learn. It's like, I don't know.
Yeah. So you're saying my 14-year-old, he still does not have his multiplication facts memorized. And I do have some kind of a book. It's like it's helping you memorize through story, and there's illustrations. I can't remember what it's called. It's behind me in this cabinet. And so I'm like, okay, when he gets home today, it's like, Vaughn, you do have to know. Richard said we need to memorize those multiplication facts. He could probably go up to 5. No, but it is something that he's like, I don't even need to use it. But I think about how many times I use multiplication just when I'm grocery shopping, just when, like, I am really happy that I had drill and kill and I learned, those facts at least, because I do use it day to day. I don't want to have to keep relying on my phone. You said it's really important that they see the why. And so I think that's what we really need to lead with a lot of these kids are so used to having phones now and computers. And it's like, okay, well, we tell you why you need to use this and it's going to help you, then maybe they'll be, more willing to do so.
Yeah. And you want them to have a basic number sense. And so you need that sort of basic addition and basic multiplication to have that number sense, because so many things you'll see in the news. The news is almost entirely enumerate. So when they're telling you something, sometimes you can just very quickly be like, oh, that's obviously wrong. Because if you multiply those two numbers, you're telling me that, whatever you're explaining here is going to cost $4 trillion. That's obviously not true. So let's not believe anything else we're talking about here. So these are...
Yeah. Well, my middle son, he had his multiplication facts memorized before he was 3. So it's like their brains work and they're both twice exceptional, but they just, because my middle son is the one that has done Beast Academy, and his number sense is he just calculates stuff. He has like a human calculator. And so it's really cool though to see how they learn, and then finding different ways that make them want to have or cultivates that positive relationship with math. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. What are some common causes of math anxiety you've observed? We talked about this a little bit, and you said we were going to come back to it. So I would love to dive into that. And can you also, share some techniques to help students overcome their fear of math?
It's almost entirely due to bad experiences. And a lot of the root of the bad experiences is when students are put in an environment where getting answers incorrect means failure. And I think that's, for parents of very young children, is to try to just avoid ever teaching them that. Because it's not natural for kids to believe this. You've had little children when they're 4, like everything is hard. They can't do anything, but they want to do everything. They see you doing amazing things, chopping vegetables, riding a bicycle, and they want to do that too. They can't do it though, or they're going to try anyway. They're not going to be able to do it because they're still 4. They're going to cry and cry and cry and go running and screaming and hollering because, they are 4. But then they're going to do something really amazing because they're 4. and they haven't learned yet how to quit forever. They're going to come back. They're going to keep trying. We train this out of kids. And so, yes, there are kids who are perfectionists. And to some extent, sometimes that's going to be an inherent behavior, but it's also somewhat a learned behavior. If they're told that that is the expectation, particularly in a math class, to be perfect, they'll internalize that. And then when they start missing things, then it becomes very anxious. And they don't have this relationship with writing. Because writing, when you're first learning, like, it's obvious that it's hard. It might actually be hard to write, but it's also, there's not a clear right and a wrong. In math, 3 + 7, there's a right and a wrong here. But if the student answers 9, it's not, you're wrong. It's, well, let's try that one again. And this is part of why in like most of our homework, students aren't marked, if they get it wrong the first time, they get another shot at it. It's not like you get the big red mark, you don't get another shot at it. We want kids to try again, and be okay with missing problems from time to time. A lot of our assignments, you don't have to get every single one right to be passing. A lot of elementary school learning systems, they'll have 5 problems. And if you miss that 5th problem, well, you've got to do 5 problems again. And if you miss the 5th problem on the next time around, you've got to do 5 problems again. And it's torture for the kids. So I think that is a big part of avoiding the anxiety coming up in the first place. Now, once a child has it, then you have extra work to do as a teacher, as a parent, to get them over it. And you have to model that behavior. You have to be, you sometimes do some things that are wrong and being like, oh, I did that wrong. Well, let's just try this again. Not freak out, not make a big deal. Oh, I did it wrong. No, okay, let's just do this again. Erase, start over again. So I think that's a really big part of it. Another piece there is get them to a successful point and celebrate the success when they get there. Like, overcoming failure feels so good. Overcoming a challenge feels so good. And getting them to shift from thinking of it as overcoming failure to overcoming a challenge. Well, now you've won, because then they're going to want to do it again and again and again. And they're going to believe they can. But it's going to take time for kids who have really internalized this. So when kids come into our curriculum, there's a learning period where students have to overcome this fear, particularly kids who have always gotten hundreds on everything, and it's new. For students for whom they already have a shaky relationship with math, they're already used to having some struggle. But we've seen this all the time with our materials. We had our Introduction to Algebra book out before our pre-algebra book. And when the intro algebra book was out and no pre-algebra, in the homeschool community, the intro algebra book had this reputation of being so hard. And then we released the pre-algebra book. And the pre-algebra book had this reputation of being so hard. But the algebra book, that was kind of easy. And you see what happens there, right? They adjust. They adjust their expectations. They understand what's expected of them and how to approach the material and how to react when they're not getting everything right.
Something I really had to work on was not just modeling, but how I talked about my relationship with math, especially because the child I was attempting to homeschool could really school me in math. And like I said, he could do all the calculations. I'm like, okay, hold on. I'm like counting it in my head. And he's like, it's this number, and, he loves problem solving and loves riddles and figuring those kinds of things out. So I had to really work on how I talked about how I felt about math, instead of saying things that were like, I'm really bad at it, or math is not my thing. And because then they start to, even though he loved it, like I started to see that he started to have that same mindset about math too. I'm like, wait, no, you love it. Like, this is your thing. But he was listening to me talk about it in such negative ways for so long. Yeah. So I think that's really important that we pay attention to
a funny story. The other day, I'm in a position at Prenda right now that really challenges me. I'm at my learning frontier. It's not something that I'm like technically qualified to do, I'd say. But so I'm learning a ton, right? And I had to like calculate some sort of like rate I just was doing math. And I literally did not know. I could feel my brain. I was asking my brain to solve the problem. And my brain was like, I'm coming up short here, sis. Like, Just like, I had nothing for you. Like, do you want me to do something? It was like feeding me, like, do you want this phonogram or this literacy principle? It's like just blank zone for math. And so I ran out. My husband was luckily good at math and good at spelling. Those are my the things that I have a fixed mindset around, my competencies, we'll say. So I ran out, and my kids, I have an 11-year-old and 9-year-old boys who are in Prenda. And we talk about this stuff all the time. I'm working so hard as a parent, and their guides are working so hard to give them this framing that it is okay to make mistakes. And my boys are really close together. So there's a little bit of competition. And the younger one is a little bit, like he will try 1,000 times. He was literally, I was like, do you want to be on this like fancy, like hard club volleyball team the other day? And he was like, I do not care if I am the worst person. I know that I will get better if I play with those kids. And I was like, okay, great. We'll sign you up. And then the other boy, my oldest boy, was like, doesn't sound fun to me. And I'm like, okay. Cause his personality is just a little bit more like, I don't want to be bad. I'm the older brother. I'm already supposed to be like better. Like, so he, that competition is tricky for him. So I ran out. I was just trying to solve this math problem. I ran out and I was like, to my husband, can you just come watch me do this math? Like this is a very high stakes math problem. This isn't a practice, right? It's like, if I get this wrong, our company will it will not be good for our company. So like, come watch me do my math. And I was like talking through my husband, like we were just having a conversation about math, and my boys are watching me in the real world do math at a high risk. It's like, I need to get this right. But then I'm like, using my resources and getting double checked and like talking about it. And my son was like, I think that problem, like a very similar problem, was in my math last year. And I'm like, yes, I'm going to ignore that makes me feel very sad personally, but I'm going to celebrate you. I'm like, yes, you can do, like, the math you're learning is very relatable to the real world. And we really need to have these skills. And his math attitude has been a little bit different since he saw that. But it took a lot of vulnerability for me. Like I wasn't, and that it's hard to lead that way as a parent. It is. It's really hard.
Being willing to ask for help. Like so many students, it's hard for them to ask for help, particularly students who have coasted and are hitting choppy waters for the first time. So the longer a student goes before needing to ask for help, harder it's going to be. So showing them your vulnerability in being willing to ask.
Yeah. Any other tips you can add to that about like building a growth mindset around math that you've seen?
I mean, part of it is just living it yourself. Is like, let's go learn how to do the thing. So whether it could be anything, any challenge you're encountering in the house where you've got to figure out how to do something and you don't know how to do it. Well, let's go get on the internet and look for a video that teaches us how to do this. So to show that, we can actually learn how to do new things.
The other day, my husband was fixing our minivan doors, and we have a very common minivan, and he was like Googling it, and like the boys are like kind of helping, like shadowing him, and he got on YouTube and Googled that and was watching this video. And it ended up, it was my older brother in real life that had made this video, put it on YouTube, and my husband had found it. And he was like, come here, those are your brother's hands? Isn't that your brother's voice? And I'm like, yeah,
those are your brother's hands. How does he know your brother's hands?
His face was not in the shot. I was like, isn't that his watch? So then my boys were able to see, like, I come from a family of learners. Like, we are DIY, figure it out people. And when we know something, we can help it. So it really is about setting that example as a parent, as an educator, building this new culture around like the idea that it's okay to not know and that you can get help. And I think that the more that we lean into that, like the healthier this next generation is going to feel around problem solving and to really attack life as if it's just one big problem. Like it might not have to do with math. Like you've said several times, like it's everything, right? And I love that you call your organization the art of problem solving. It's not like, let's teach math tricks, right? It's the opposite of that, which is so powerful.
So we talked about Beast Academy a lot. You have a high school program too. You have like the online school, but do you have like workbooks and like a curriculum specifically for high schoolers?
We've talked a lot about Beast Academy. That's beastacademy.com. That's our elementary school. That's where you'll find the books. You'll find the learning system. Then for middle school and high school, that's actually where we started, was middle school and high school. We started with contests, then we expanded to a full curriculum for students who are, have high interest and high potential in mathematics. So we have a full strand of textbooks. So this is pre-algebra, algebra, geometry. We also have explorations in areas that you typically don't see in school, like counting and probability. So these are the beginning steps of discrete math. And discrete math is the mathematics. It's kind of the fundamentals of computer science. So it's gotten a lot more important than your standard kind of pre-calculus, calculus. So we've got all of that in textbooks. We also have the 2 online schools. One of the online schools goes through all that curriculum that I just discussed. It also has classes now in physics. We're building out a computer science curriculum. And then in our learning centers, we also have a language arts curriculum that goes grade 2 up to 12. That's in all of our physical learning centers and in our newer online school that we started. So the flagship website is artofproblemsolving.com, AoPS.com. Either one of them point to the same place. That also has a large online community. So we have, on any given day, there are thousands and thousands of students from all over the world on the community, mostly talking about math, sometimes talking about video games, but they're coming together. It's often, honestly, for a lot of our kids, it's their first experience of the internet. It's the thing their parents will let them do when they're 10 or 11. And what they find is they find friends, they find a community, so that when they start, later going to this program or that program, they'll often have friends already there. So that's the AoPS.com. Then our learning centers are AoPSacademy.org, AoPS Academy, all one word there, .org. And like I said, we have 15 around the country. And
are those a supplement to regular school, or are they kind of like, I feel like Mathnasium doesn't open until 3 because they're more like for kids struggling in school, and then we use that even as a homeschool family, or are they open during the day? What does that look like?
They're open. They're after school and summers. Because most of our students are also in school, though we do have a lot of homeschoolers as well in those classes. There are places where we've gotten large enough that we started to experiment with some homeschool times, but generally we find that they end up going to the evening or early evening classes, because some of them start as early as 3 or 3:30.
Awesome. Okay, so this has been such a great conversation. I'm so excited I got to meet you.
I want to go do some math now.
I know. I'm like, okay, let's learn. Let's challenge ourselves. We can do it, Katie. Learning over comfort. So this is a question we ask all of our guests: is who is someone who has kindled your love of learning, curiosity, motivation, or passion? Because I'm hearing all of those things as we talk to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say the teacher that enabled it most was Gwen Snoddy that I mentioned before, was our math team coach for Austin High School. And she, like I said, she drove us almost every weekend. We went somewhere in Alabama to participate in some sort of event. But the fostering interest was mainly my parents. And that, like I said, my mom, first grade teacher, she was 21, or maybe she was 22 when she had me. So she had just finished school, so she's going to practice all of her first grade teacher wiles on me from when I was very young. And all through my childhood, like, they would say no to candy, they would say no to toys sometimes, but they never said no to a book. And that, I think, was a big part of my childhood, was reading. And so that's another thing people ask me, what should I be doing with my 7-year-old to get them to be great at math? I'm like, feed them books, give them books, because that's where they're going to learn about developing new ideas. So like, I still spend a lot more time reading than I do solving math problems. So that's that's probably the kind of culture you're trying to build in your homes as well. I can see all the books in your background.
I love just imagining that your mom and that teacher that you had, like, sure, it wasn't convenient all of the time, but and they have no idea, like, the ripple effects of, like, getting the kids in the car and drive, like, just doing all of the things that we do as parents. Like, your decisions to step into a child's life as a kindler, someone who knows how to do that and how to change a life trajectory there, like, you just can never know the ripple effects. So you're now affecting thousands and thousands of families and kids. And, even you, like, that seems like a big work, but the ripple effects of your work, will be ongoing. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today and for coming on the Kindled podcast.
All right. Well, thank you as well.
All right. We'll talk later.
Thank you. That's it for today. We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Kindled podcast and you're as excited about math as Katie and I. We are going to go fail.
We are.
At math and get better so that we can learn things. And I love the fact, Katie, that you said you talked to your brain. That is just so cool.
Little secretary up there.
So let's go talk to our brains about math and tell them that they can do it. So if this episode was helpful to you, please like, subscribe, and follow us at Prenda Learn. Katie and I have been creating some really fun content that's for parents and educators, and it's really packed with value. If you have a question you'd like us to address, please leave a comment or email us at podcast@prenda.com. You can subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Sunday Spark.
The Kindled podcast is brought to you by Prenda. Prenda makes it easy for you to start and run an amazing microschool based on all the things we talk about here on the Kindled podcast. If you want to learn more about guiding a Prenda microschool, go to prenda.com. Thanks for listening, and remember to keep kindling.